I'm still in Revelation chapter 20. Really in Revelation chapter 1, verse 3, which led us to the Beatitudes, the 7 Beatitudes that we find in the book of Revelation. Not the 7 Beatitudes in the gospel record, but the 7 Beatitudes here in the book of Revelation. And we're at the point where we're still looking at, we haven't gone past this point, on verse 1. Actually, we started with this particular beatitude in verse 6. We only dealt with half of that, the latter half of verse 6, about the 1,000 years. And then I decided to keep going, and we start with verse 1. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And we looked at that chain and how even the heavens declare that message. It seems so long ago now. But even the heavens declare that message, and I showed you how it points that out. Not quite done with that yet either, but I gave you enough information to show you even the heavens declare that information to us. So man has no excuse. And then in verse 2, and he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him to the bottomless pit, and shut him up, set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a little season. Now I haven't dealt with when that 1,000 years will take place, or has it already taken place, and what this little season is. Because we're still talking about the place where I believe we can find the bottomless pit. I believe there's multiple bottomless pits in this planet Earth. But I believe Duodel, if you remember that in the previous teachings not too long ago, you can find it in the northern areas of the Golan Heights today in Israel. It's like the Stonehenge of Israel, but much larger than Stonehenge. And by the way, I don't believe Stonehenge, and many of you have received teaching on Stonehenge, and I believe that's an astronomical calendar too, but it's also a key. But I'm not getting to that right now because it's not pertinent to this verse. So whatever you believed about, and you thought about, and what you read about or heard about Stonehenge, I got more to add to it. It's not an altar where Druids sacrificed or presented their offerings. It has bigger implications, but that's another subject for another time also. So many subjects with so little time. Now, I got a list here, Gil 1, to refresh people's memories real quick on what I'm talking about. A picture paints 1,000 words in this case. So if you got Gil 1, put it up. Gil 1. You can see the Sea of Galilee there, kind of like the left center in that picture, or on that picture. And then you could see where basically the surrounding areas where you would find Duodel. Now just above Gilgal Raphaim, you see a square with a Stonehenge-looking figure. That is Gilgal Raphaim. That's what we've been looking at. And by the way, in this whole general area, if you would take the most southern border of the Sea of Galilee and all the way, by the way, where you see Gilgal Raphaim, you just go north, not that far of a distance, is where the mount the angels came down on. And all that northern area, the eastern area especially, you find a lot of altars to these fallen angels and Astra eventually worship. That was taking place, and all the altars that was built to worship these fallen angels and demons. Go to Gil 2. It gives you a better location geographically on a map. You see Gilgal Raphaim by the Sea of Galilee, and to the right of that, the southeast of that is Astaroth, and then just south of that is where King Og. Remember King Og in the Old Testament? That was his general location, the whole Raphaim area. Now, you see Gilgal Raphaim in the north eastern part of the Sea of Galilee. And you can see the proximity is to Mount Hermon, which is just at the base of the mountain, basically, where the fallen angels came down. It was almost like their portal of going to and fro. Now to go to Gil 4, and this is the astronomical calendar or key that you find there. Most people never even heard of this before I brought it up. But yet, it's there in the Golan Heights area. And what this is, an astronomical calendar and the key of some sort that opens and closes this, I believe, the bottomless pit. Now, the picture doesn't do it justice, but it's quite large. And this is what I've been referring to when I teach on the Gilgal Raphaim. If you miss all that teaching, then you need to go back to the archives. I think some of this is already available in the Last Day series, some of the latest messages. So you need to go back and refresh your memory. Or, if you haven't listened to it, listen to it the first time so you could get an idea what I'm referring to. But I'm going to continue reading now what I started. Come back to me. In Enoch, we are told how the opening to Tartutus, which I brought up to us, and I brought up in the last message, the connection with Gilgal Raphaim and Tartutus. Once again, go to the archives. In Enoch, we are told how the opening to Tartutus is shut by an angel of the Lord. In Revelation 9, we are told about another angel who is given the key to Tartutus and who opens the pit and lets out what's shut in, what was shut in Enoch's day. There is, of course, a connection here. Is it the same place? It is in the desert in Duodel, east of Jerusalem, Israel, northeast, to be more precise. Let's look at a couple of more parallels. In Enoch, Azazel, one of the fallen angels that led mankind astray, this is where he's imprisoned in this place. I'm not going to review all the information that led up to this. I have to continue because I'm short in time tonight and just too much to go over. If you don't remember what I taught on, go back to the archives. Let's look at a couple of more parallels. In Enoch, Azazel is imprisoned in this place. It's, of course, not only a physical place, but it is a physical place also. And the angel puts a lid over him. In Revelation 20, another angel is put in the same prison. So we have Azazel back millenniums ago, placed in this prison. And then in Revelation 20, another angel puts another angel, the chief angel, that fell into this prison and puts a seal over the hole, which we just read in verse 3, and cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up and set a seal upon him. He just didn't dig a hole, cast Satan into it, and then cover it up again. He also places a seal. A seal. What was the lid in Enoch's day? It was an astronomical calendar, because that is what the Gilgal Raphaim is. We know the power of binding and loosing. Raphael was told to bind Azazel to Tartutus and to that stone mound for 70 generations. And I know there's an argument, which is not the subject matter tonight, about the 70 generations where Azazel and some other fallen angels would be bound. Now, anybody that studies the genealogy of the individuals that led up to Christ realize from the very beginning, from Adam to Christ, was 77 generations. And a generation there is not so much about years, but about person from person to person to person. Now from Enoch, if you would take that measurement of time, just using a person followed by another person, followed by another person instead of just years, then Enoch to Jesus would be 70 generations. Now, some try to calculate it by years. And if that's the case, then from Enoch's time to the present, somewhere between about 50, 60 years ago until the now, is when those 70 generations would be up. Now, I'm not taking a side tonight which measurement we should use. The individual measurement of people that are listed. For instance, Noah, the next generation would be Shem, and so forth. Or, more familiar, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and so forth, adding up to 70 generations or 70 individuals that would calculate the time from Enoch to Jesus. Do I think that's the correct timetable to use? Or do I think amount of years is the calculation that we should be using that would put us somewhere into the present time, depending on your viewpoint? And there's different viewpoints and different reasons for those viewpoints of which measurement we should use. Now, most lean towards sometime still yet in the future, but it's in this near proximity of where we are today, 2015. But that's not the subject matter tonight. It was an astronomical calendar, because that is what the Gilgal Raphaim is. We know the power of binding and loosening, of course. It was Jesus says, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, whatever you loose on earth will be loose in heaven. There's nothing new. This is not some mystical thing that this author is bringing up. We know there's binding and loosing. And maybe I'll go into that a little bit more at this time. I'm not sure yet what that entails. But there's binding and loosing that's going on. Jesus brought it up. And he was not trying to just be poetic about it either. We know the power of binding and loosing. Raphael was told to bind Azazel to Tartutus and to that stone mound for 70 generations. I believe the binding and imprisonment is built into the pattern of the stone circle. I tend to believe that also. Am I 100% accurate and sure about it? God only knows if it's 100% accurate. Am I sure? Not 100%. But you give me a better explanation. And don't give me any Christian science fiction theories. At least I'm putting some substance behind this. At least I'm giving you a location. What have they given you? They've given you fairy tales. They've given you sunshine and rainbows up there. Well, I don't have to go there. I believe the binding and imprisonment is built into the pattern of the stone circle. It's a seal. Just like the seal that is going to bind the devil in the pit for 1,000 years. And of course, this author takes the opinion that it hasn't happened yet. I say, wait a minute. Let's look at both sides first to see if that is accurate or not, which I haven't done yet. This has a very interesting parallel in the ancient Scandinavian history, and it helps us to understand what actually is taking place in Revelation 9 and 20. In the end of the Viking Age, there was a man named Ketil Runsky who was famed for his skills in writing and using runes to bind and loose. You might call him a sorcerer, and you might be right. But he was also a Christian. He lived during the passage between heathendom and Christendom. so the borders weren't as clear as they became later on in time. There's an old story about him being called to the lake Storsjön in the north of the country where a lake monster had been seen. This is the same as the one which still can be seen sometimes. Kettle came to the lake, and together with the rune master, he bound the sea serpent to the bottom of the lake by writing on a stone that is still standing there by the lake. Put up seal 1. This is what's still standing there. Is this seal. And of course the sea monster. I'm sure some of the stories have been exaggerated over the course of time. But the sea monster's tail, for instance, was once so large in the storytelling that it covered from one end of the lake to another. There you see the tail of the sea monster being bound. If you look at the bottom of that picture, where it could not terrify the residents of the area any longer. And supposedly, Kettle Runsky placed his seal to bind this creature. You got it? Keep it up there for a minute. It's still standing there. The runes doesn't say anything about the binding. They only tell about the man who christened that part of the country. But it is known that the rune masters use secret codes built into the runes with a hidden meaning. There is, though, a serpent depicted on the stone. Anyway, the story goes that the lake creature was bound, and the only time it really started to trouble the people and fishermen in the lake was during the time when the runestone had been broken in 2 pieces. You almost could see where it was broken in that picture. And was laying on the ground. So they put the stone back together and raised it. And the lake monster disappeared again. Now this is an ancient story of the origin and binding of the lake monster recorded in 1635. And there's some other stories and legends that go along with it. And here's another one that was written down in 1685. It is said that beneath this stone lies a dreadfully large head of a serpent, and the body stretches over Storsjön to Kitnta by and hilly sand where the tail is buried. The serpent was called a Ra, and therefore shall the stone be risen. Since no one peacefully could cross Storsjön, the ferryman and his wife states, along with many others, that in the last turbulent time this stone was torn down and broken in 2. As long as the stone laid on the ground, many strange things occurred in the water until the stone was risen and assembled anew. So why am I telling you this? Because there we have the same thing. What does Revelation 9 verse 2 say? Let's read it again. And he laid a hold on the dragon, that old serpent, you come back to me, which is the devil, and Satan, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. And 3 continues, and cast him into this bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him. The star angel was given the key to the bottomless pit. In Revelation 9:2. Let's read that. Revelation 9:2. Go there quickly. Let's start at verse 1. And the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit, and the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air was darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And of course it continues what happened after that. So this angel was given the key to the bottomless pit, And now, remember that we are talking about Gilgal Raphaim. So the angel is given the key to the star calendar to be able to break the binding and loose those who were put there. It's not the stones that are keeping the pit locked. It is the pattern, the meaning built into the circle. And it is the same thing with the runes that Kettle had honed into the Froso stone. The binding of the creature to the bottom of the lake. These clear parallels show that people in ancient days knew much more about binding and loosing than we do. So what those angels were doing, both the ones who bound and the one who loosened, was kind of an invocation. Now, it is not my intention to draw the obvious parallels over to the Stonehenge and similar places built around the same time as Gilgal Raphaim, so I just leave it for the reader to make the connections for himself. Can we make those connections? That'd be interesting. They are there, and they could be similar reasons for those monuments and for the stone circles built by the holy angel Raphael. The tale, by the way, also said that if any man could decipher the runes in the stone, the monster would be let loose again. If any man had the key, that is, to the binding of the creature to the bottom of this lake or the abyss. So what is it saying? Binding and loosing was nothing new. This is just one story. There's others. Could this Gilgal Raphaim be the bottomless pit? Absolutely. Could this bottomless pit be the pit that's holding or held Azazel? Absolutely. Of course, in the Old Testament, the King James translated as scapegoat. Really bad translation. Remember, there was a scapegoat or goat that was also offered to Azazel, and he would be set free in the desert wilderness. All the sins was placed on this goat. I might get to that and tie it in with what we are looking at now. Could this be the place that Satan has been or will be bound for whatever this 1,000 years that maybe has already taken place or still yet to be a future event? Now, I've leaned and I've given you hints that I believe Satan's already been bound. And he's not going to be bound for a millennium just to be let loose again to tempt mankind. Does that mean that we're going to be tempted again? And we could lose our salvation? Think about it. And of course, I've given you the definitions and descriptions of what millennium actually means in the Greek, which really has nothing to do with what you've been hearing and reading about in books or hearing through sermons, that it only means 1,000 years. That is the furthest thing from the truth. Review those messages. But I wanted to point out tonight, Gilgal Raphaim, you could put that picture up again. I think it's Gil 4. Is an astronomical calendar as well as a seal. and it can be unlocked. The question is, has it already been unlocked? And has Azazel, Satan, if he was imprisoned for that period of time, been let loose? Or Azazel and Satan still yet to be bound is a future event. By the way, you ever notice that there's not Satan mentioned that much in the Old Testament? Why is that? You see him mentioned all over the place in the New Testament. Why not in the Old Testament? You ever ask yourself that question? Why is Satan or the devil not mentioned? There's other names like the Prince of Tyre and stuff that we can find, which I believe also reference him. But I'm talking about the name Satan or the devil or any Hebrew equivalent not mentioned in the Old Testament. Or does it? It's just we've not been told how to look for it. How to see in the scriptures where he is mentioned. It's just we overlooked it because by translators that didn't see it for themselves, or maybe by using a different name in the Old Testament that we're not familiar with. Interesting, isn't it? Then the question that we have to ask, come back to me now. Could Azazel be the name for Satan in the Old Testament? Some people believe it. Satan was Azazel. And the people that believe that usually take the 70 generations from Enoch to be individual family generations that transpired from person to person instead of from a certain period of time to a certain period of time. And the 70 generations would have been from Enoch that would finally end when Jesus arrived on the scene. You think because Satan's locked up, if he was Azazel, there wouldn't be continuing evil in this world? Remember, the giants are demons. Their spirits still roam this planet. They still know their marching orders from Satan himself. And Satan has a lot of principalities and powers in the air that he controls and still control, even if he was in a pit. Evil beings that are willing to carry out his marching orders. Now, a lot of this is speculation. But have you never asked yourself, why don't we see Satan coming up as often in the New Testament, not even close, as in the Old Testament? Why? Old Testament believers didn't believe that the devil or Satan existed? The closest thing we have it in the earlier books in the scriptures is his reference, and a reference that he's disguised himself as a serpent that beguiled Eve. And you know the story from then on. So See, nobody really gets into these topics and subject matter because it takes digging in and researching and trying to come up with the best explanation you can using the sources that you can find to come up with some kind of explanation why certain things happen or didn't happen in the New Testament, or why they're not referenced to as often as the Old Testament, as often as you can see it in the New Testament, Satan being one of them. Do I believe Satan existed back in the Old Testament? Absolutely. No question. But could Satan been Azazel? And if he was Azazel, if I go that direction, which I'm not saying if I am or if I'm not, then you would have to take the timeline where 70 generations, the best description of it would be then from Enoch to Jesus. And then he was let loose again. And we know he tempted Jesus in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. But then, could he have been bound shortly after that again? Not to mention the other fallen watchers that are prisoned in the Pleiades. Have they already been let loose? The reason why nobody teaches on these subjects because there's a lot of what ifs. So it's just better to stay with the Christian science fiction theories that projects everything in the future. So if you get raptured pre or mid, you don't have to worry about any of this stuff. It's not pertinent because you won't be here to see it anyway or experience it. So if you want to ignore the subject matter, then you take that view and you stick with it. But if you're not happy with that viewpoint, then you're obligated to dig in and search and try to figure out what's the closest thing to the facts and the truth that we possibly could find that would give us some explanations of why, for instance, the example I use, Satan's not identified as he has identified in reference to so often in the New Testament, but not in the Old. A lot of what ifs. We like to blame Satan for everything. We like to blame Satan, the devil, for everything. But he has a hierarchy that he controls. Whether he is in the pit or out of the pit, he controls and has enough influence to carry out his evil agenda. And they're willing participants. They already fell. They don't have an option for salvation. So they're coming against God and everything they can possibly come against God with, and attacking the ones that he has spilled his precious blood for. So we have a target on our armor. But our armor, as I said last Sunday morning, is more than able to withstand what they have to offer as far as an attack goes. Now, this is why the book of Revelation as far as commentaries go, or as far as people preaching it through 12 CDs, don't cover much. I don't even entertain for 1 second anybody that offers that they're going to go through the book of Revelation with 12 CDs. That's a clear sign that they don't know what they're talking about. There's no way possible that you could present all the information in 12 CDs. You could even present it in 12 volumes, and each volume 500 pages apiece. Yeah. The old timers knew about sealing. Whether it was sorcery or not, and I'm not for sorcery, because anything that God will use, Satan and his evil forces will use it and come up with their own counterfeit suggestions how it should be used, by controlling people that could be possessed by their influences. But there's binding and loosing that takes place. Jesus made that very clear to his disciples. We see it here in the book of Revelation, that there were seals placed on a location, for instance, Tartarus or the Bottomless Pit, whatever you want to call it. And you need a key to open it up. What that key is, I'm not sure. I'm sure it's spiritual in nature, something we cannot even see. But nevertheless, it's still a key. And it does the job when needed to carry out God's command. When he says, bind or loose. Period. Now, I think this is all very interesting. I think this is worth the time that it takes to look into it, to get an idea of what the book of Revelation is referring to. And I firmly believe, and if I'm wrong, so what? If Gilgal-Raphaim is not the bottomless pit, I guarantee you there's another bottomless pit somewhere on this planet. I'm not denying there's not a bottomless pit, but I don't think it's by accident that we find it in the location that we find it in. On that particular location was just south of Mount Hermon, where angels would go to and fro from the heavenlies, and where a lot of false worship was established in Ashtaroth, which God hated with a vengeance. Established itself in that same general area. I think. And not to mention, which I haven't even got to yet, the goat that's dedicated for Azazel. Why? And why it was released into the desert area. Released into the area pointing in the direction where this Gilgal-Raphaim is located. Another coincidence? Maybe, but I don't think so. I just don't think so, friend. And could there be replicas of Gilgal-Raphaim as the tribes and others beside the tribes would take in different parts of the world to remind themselves of that historical event? Wouldn't that be interesting if we could locate anything like that? I don't believe it's coincidence where it's located. I believe it's there for a reason. A bunch of Israelites or Jews, or even Canaanites, decided to make stone circles one day over a large area for no purpose. Oh, Raphael, the angel that bound and cast Azazel into the pit, had a purpose, God's purpose. Remember, Azazel and those fallen angels were influencing mankind to the point where God had to destroy them because of their wickedness. But I'll continue on that thought. I'm out of time tonight. I'll continue on that thought, and I'll pick it up where I left off as we explore this area a little bit more. And to see we could further verify this is exactly where the bottomless pit Azazel went. And exactly the pit that he either ascended or will ascend. And this is the same pit that either Satan was thrown into or will be thrown into. And we'll look at all of that in the very near future as we keep digging in. I told you, you thought I was going to preach through Revelation verse by verse and get through it quickly. Can't. There's just too much there to look at. And I'm summarizing some of these things to the point where if I don't, I won't even get to chapter 3 before my time on this earth is finished. So I have to speed this up along in the places I think that we should quickly go through to get to some other pertinent areas that I believe that's more important to get a better understanding. And if I have time to come back to it, or if I need to reference it back to it, I will. I have an idea where we're going, folks. I'm just not haphazardly going through this. There's a purpose why I'm laying this out piece by piece by piece the way I'm doing it. But it's going to take time. Now, if you don't believe any of this, that's fine. This has nothing to do with salvation. Go back to your Christian science fiction theories and just hope that you're not here when all this happens. But if you are, at least you'll be armed with some information that you ignored because you just couldn't believe it. But yet you'll believe that was presented for the last 200 years, that Christian science fiction nonsense. That turns your mind off because you're speculating on something that hopefully you won't be here to see in the first place. This doesn't. If I'm right, this prepares you for what's coming or what's been here, and it's only going to get worse. Now, I find this interesting. If anything, I could preach to myself. But this is very interesting. And if you want me to continue, if you think this is interesting also, I want to hear from you. I'm trying to dedicate Wednesday nights to the Last Day series for now. And I'll try to push along as fast as I can through these subject matters. And if you want to do your own research on the subject matter, even though there's not that much out there concerning these issues, you should do it. But I'll get to the general important parts that I believe you should become aware of, which I think gives us hope, or additional hope is a better way of placing it, or putting it, in God's Word. That things that we can find in God's Word could actually have a physical explanation here on this planet. Be honest with yourself. You always thought the bottomless pit is something that maybe somewhere, maybe it was in the oceans, or maybe it was this place. Some place you cannot physically put a face to on this planet, but you know it exists because you believe it in faith that what God says is true. Well, I'm giving you a possibility now. This is what it is. Because there's no other further explanation except maybe King Og built it to sacrifice the false demons and gods. Well, he didn't build it. And I can't find no references or information that says that he did. That is only speculation on people that can't figure anything else out, so they give that explanation. He did not build it. I believe Raphael did. And if you do, let me know now while they play a song.